Today's video does contain subject matter that some viewers may find disturbing, and viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, good day, mate. Hi. Okay, so I guess I'm bringing you a ghost story, or maybe several, depending on how much I can write. At least, I think they were ghosts. It happened in an area called The Rocks, and some explanations about it are necessary. Otherwise, you're not going to understand what I'm talking about. The Rocks is an area in Sydney. It has some of the oldest pubs in the country, and it's a real touristy area too. It was one of the first building sites used by the early British settlers, and originally there were the Cadigal Aboriginal people. It has had a rocky past. Pun totally intended. I think over 100 homes were destroyed in order to make room for the Sydney Harbour Bridge. There have been plagues, gang activity, and it's had convicts, prostitutes, and recently it has been gentrified a lot. But it still has times when it can be pretty rough. Essentially, the area has a lot of history, and not all of it has been pleasant. There are even ghost tours that take place around the area. However, I've never been on one personally. I thought that ghost stories were just to try to add another tourist cash cow to the area. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the stories I've heard or what ones have been promoted, nor will I be telling you about the local legends or anything like that. You wanted true experiences that people have been through. I also haven't bothered to see if anyone else had gone through something similar either. So, here's mine. I was walking down through the rocks at nighttime. Keep in mind, the city is still active during the night, and it isn't strange to see people walking around. I was walking to get a drink after catching up with some friends at one of the local restaurants. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay out late and completely enjoy the evening with them, because I had to work the next day. Part of the joy of dealing with a bunch of adult schedules, I was enjoying looking out at the water and at the boats. It was so peaceful that people often forget the history that comes with the place. Then, I heard giggling, and I saw a couple of kids hanging out by the water. It was pretty late, and most of the children would have been asleep by this time. I looked around for any sign of their parents or adults that they would have come with, and I walked toward one of the cafes that was in the area. There was no one to be found that could be their parents. I didn't want these kids to fall in or deal with any danger, so I decided to approach them to see what was happening. I knew they would likely be wary of strangers, which, who wouldn't be, right? When I walked toward them, I had this feeling that I was intruding, and I wasn't wrong. These kids didn't act like they were scared or otherwise in danger. They were minding their business. And, well, I sure as hell wish I would have been minding mine. I walked up and asked them if they were all right. It was quiet. I could have sworn that time had almost stopped for just a moment. The children froze, and they didn't look at me. I gulped. I wish that I took the hint and just left it alone, but I asked them again if they were all right, and if they wanted me to call somebody. But nothing. I decided at that moment that they were probably warned about strangers, and it was only now that I realized that something wasn't quite right with the children. They were dressed in old-style clothing. Maybe 1920s? Earlier, or maybe a little later, I'm not sure. I don't know a lot about these sorts of things. The clothing was rotten and torn, and there was a disgusting smell coming from them. They were sickly, blotchy, pale in color, and Looking at them in the mixed light, I could have sworn their hair had seaweed and shells in it. I must have whispered, "What the hell?" or something like that, and one of the boys slowly turned his head to look at me. I fell backwards at the sight. It was absolutely awful. His face was hollowed out, like the skin had been ripped off by something, and his eye sockets were empty. There were no eyes to be seen. I couldn't tell if he was smiling or sneering at me. Either way, I didn't care. I needed to get out of there as fast as I could. I turned and ran as quickly as possible in the opposite direction. I could hear those damned kids giggling in the background. I ran until I reached the nearest bus stop to wait for my bus to get home. My body finally gave up and I was hunched over, gasping for air. Hell, I was heaving, and all of my limbs ached from running. I did get home safe, and nothing weird happened, although I was jumpy for ages after this. You know when there's any slight noise that freaks you out? Yeah, that was what was happening to me. I haven't really told anyone about what I saw or what happened. I don't think that the ghost kid was trying to hurt me, just trying to get me to respect their space. And I learned my lesson. I'm never going to try that sort of thing ever again. I haven't stopped going to the rocks. I'm not the sort to stop living my life because it made someone else unhappy. I don't like looking at the water as much anymore, and I think about how many bodies must have been thrown in there over the years. I haven't done any research into who those kids could have been when they were alive, either. It's awful that they died while they were so young. You could say that I have had another encounter, or a few encounters, afterwards. I have seen the kids once in a blue moon. They seem to be watching me, but otherwise, they don't bother me and I don't bother them. We just show mutual respect. So, yeah, don't annoy the ghosts down at the rocks. Who knows what might happen if you don't give them the respect and space that they deserve. I worked as a CO, or prison guard, at one of the oldest jails in New South Wales. For those who don't know, it is the state that has Sydney in it. Parramatta is one of the bigger cities in the state, I suppose. Since it's closed, I may as well name the place since I don't have to protect anyone. It was the Parramatta Correctional Center, but it was originally called Parramatta Jail. I don't know a lot about the history, but I think things happened, and it had to be rebuilt a couple of times. I worked there in late 2010 to 2011, when it was finally shut down for good. It was a freaking crap hole. It was understaffed, filled with rats, and there were issues with the plumbing. A lot of parts weren't upgraded and still had the old cots in it. Some parts weren't being guarded properly, and some people had managed to escape, or come close to it. I remember one bloke was actually stopped a day before he planned to escape. It was built in the late 1800s, and as you can imagine, it did have a lot of history and was a pretty dangerous prison. Murderers, sex offenders, gang members. One of the guys who murdered Anita Cobby was in there too. All sorts of criminals were housed here at different stages. The inmates even managed to get their hands on guns at one point, so you have to wonder how they managed to do it. One of the inmates arrived from a different prison, only to be murdered something like 15 minutes later. It's pretty unbelievable the things that happened there. I don't think a lot of the Australian public know about how bad this prison could be. Over the history of the jail, it served as an asylum after, or just before, World War II. I can't remember all the history before that. Now that the explanation's out of the way, I'll tell you what I experienced while I worked there. I was one of the recent hires, and there were times when you could hear footsteps down the long corridor that did not come from a prisoner or the other COs. One of the old-timers told me that this was a common occurrence, and to just not let it bother me. At first, I would brush it off, but then it kept happening. I can't tell you how often it would happen. It wasn't every single night when I was on duty. Occasionally it would happen during the day also. Some of the prisoners and other staff members would say that they saw people out of the corner of their eye, only to look again and have nobody standing there. Some of the cells were pretty unsettling. I never felt comfortable going in them, so I couldn't imagine what it was like to be a prisoner stuck inside of one, unable to escape. Some of them would even get worse behavior-wise if they went into certain cells. I would sometimes feel like I was being followed by something unseen, and you know that feeling that something or someone is standing over you, wanting you to leave and trying to tell you to get away? Yeah, I felt that. I felt that all the time while I was working there. I would frequently feel nauseous and sick there. There were days when I hated going to work, and I like working, and I rarely, if ever, took sick days at my previous jobs. My GP thought that I was developing some kind of anxiety disorder. It makes sense. I was working with some of the most dangerous men in the country. I've grown up in rough areas, housing commission, and I attended some rough schools with bad reputations. And I knew a lot of gang members. Hell, I grew up with some of them. I understand the culture. Not to get involved, but be firm and fair with the inmates. Don't be a pushover, and there was a good chance you would be fine. This, however, was a completely different feeling altogether. You could feel the pain and the hatred within the prison. I didn't believe in ghosts until I started working there, and this job changed how I saw the world. I didn't normally get anxious about anything until I started working there. I had trained in a different prison with no issues. There were times when I needed to step outside and vomit. It felt like somebody was trying to strangle me, but no one was there. I'm not proud of it, but yeah, it is what it is. There are now ghost tours that take place at the jail, and they're pretty popular too. I've been asked a couple of times to go back there to tell people my experiences. I've declined each time. I've been trying to close that chapter in my life. My wife and my kids want to go on the tours though, and I can't really tell them what to do. I have asked them not to go, and so far they have agreed. I get nightmares about that place. It isn't every night or anything like that, just once in a blue moon, so to speak. Shadows following me from the dark, whispering and hands reaching out of the cells at me. It could be because I was in a high-stress workplace, and I knew about the history of the jail. Maybe it's a form of PTSD. I don't know. But that's my story about the Parramatta Correctional Center, and some of the things that I've experienced while I worked there. If I can remember some more experiences, I'll send them to your site if people like listening to them, because I do have some more. From my time working there, I soon decided that the career choice wasn't for me, and that it was time to pack it in. I hope you enjoyed my story, and thank you, As the Raven Dreams. I'm a big fan of your channel. Keep up the good work. My missus would love it if you said hello. Oh, well, hello to this person's missus. And also, don't go on those prison tours, because it sounds like that place was pretty terrifying. This story may or may not come as a surprise to people who live in the US, and I'm not sure whether I believe what I saw either, or whether I was mistaken. I'm also not sure about any Aussies who also may be aware of this. At first, I used to believe it was one of those urban legends going around. Australia doesn't naturally have any big cats or anything like that, There were some carnivorous marsupials that are now extinct. I'm not talking about those, though. I'm talking about an actual big cat. This experience changed how I thought of them. I was out bushwalking with a group of friends in an area close to farmland. Each of us had our backpacks filled with the supplies that we would need, along with the camping equipment. This happened in the early 90s, so mobile or cell phones weren't as common as they are now. The area that I'm talking about now has been built up on for a while, and over time it has gotten worse, so I'm not even sure it's the same. I actually moved interstate after this incident. A lot of the country areas of New South Wales are losing the bushland and farming land for housing. People need somewhere to live, sure, but it's a shame that it's happening too. So, anyways, we set up the tent and other things for the campsite. We settled in and began to organize dinner for the evening. It was a beautiful night, and it was fantastic being out in nature. And we took some photos that would need to be developed later. As I said, this was the 90s. And the crickets and the other insects went dead quiet every so often. We really weren't sure what the reason was, but none of us let it get in the way of enjoying our night. We were drinking, chatting, and enjoying life. I looked over in the long grass and I saw something. It was difficult to see, and I nearly missed it. I swore that it was maybe a big dog or something like that. I never would have believed it could be a big cat. I stared at it. My friend nudged me laughing and asked just how much zombie I'd had. I know the term isn't used much today, but zombie is short for cannabis. I laughed and pointed in the direction of what I saw. I told him that I thought I saw a big cat or something. He laughed even louder at me. We packed up and left, and when we were driving away, I saw what had to be a big cat. It had rounded ears rather than pointed ones, though. Maybe I did indulge a little too much, but I was nosy, and I wanted to learn more about what I had seen. I knew that feral cats could grow to be quite large out in the bush, but whatever this was had curved ears. I found some forums and tried to find any docos on it. I heard local yarns about how there had been circuses that went bankrupt and just let the animals go. Or rich pricks who did the same back in the 1800s or so. Even some saying that US soldiers had them as mascots or something, only to release them back into the wild. Again, there's no set story about what exactly happened or how the story originated. I haven't heard any of the stories about livestock being taken, and I'm pretty sure something like that would have gone after sheep. Mind you, animals die anyways, that can't be accounted for. The more that I researched, the more that I found. There was also the blue mountain panthers and the Lithgow panther. In a rare turn of events here, the person that sent this actually did send a follow-up email with some further information. So, here are some updates about my story. Actually, these are other people's stories, but they are relevant to what I initially sent in. In the early 2000s, there were more investigations into the big cats, and there were several sightings of them. Hell, even in 2002, there was a person who said that they were actually attacked by one out in the bush. So, I guess that made my encounter with my mates a close call. A lot of police officers and fireys have all seen them as well. A vet even took fur and scat samples and confirmed that it was a big cat. A report in 2003 said that there were no big cats currently, but it was likely that a big cat was around. In 2005, government officials were quiet about it and told us that they couldn't speak about the situations. Again, another report in 2008 said that the big cats were more likely than not, but it was changed before being released into the public. So, I guess that tells you something. It makes you wonder why exactly they don't want to make this information clear to the public. Why and what are they hiding? But there is even more. In 2011, I heard about an alpaca being taken down by something that left massive wounds in its skull. Too big to be a dog, and nothing native here that could do that sort of damage. A ranger apparently said that it could have been a big cat. It sounds like the people that are in the area know about it, but for some reason the government wants to hide it from us. In 2013, a mate told me about the study by some feral species specialist that denied it all, but apparently in private he said small populations were possible. These reports are nearly a decade old now, and it has been a long time since I've heard any more about it. Maybe they've gone deeper into the bush, or got better at hiding from people. Maybe the population was so small and inbred that they went extinct. Who knows? But I'm always going to remember my experience. I know what I saw, and nothing will tell me otherwise. I hope that someday we find proof that this is true, or was true at some point. And I hope that you enjoyed my story, short as it was. I want to start off by saying that I'm not someone who hangs out in the bush very often. If ever, I've only been because I was dragged out there by my partner. I prefer being in the city, and after this, I'm in no rush to go into the bush or any rural areas. I hate the heat, the bugs, the sunburn, and being away from all of the modern luxuries. My partner is the complete opposite. He loves nature, always has, and going out into the bush. It's like the Australian version of a forest, and I'm not really sure what the technical name is. We were going out around the Katoomba area. It's close to the Blue Mountains, and I admit that some of the scenery is beautiful. Since it has some nice little boutique Airbnbs and nice restaurants too. Since it's in the mountains, the temperature tends to be quite cool, and, of course, my partner decided to take me camping there out of the blue, and didn't think to tell me. Sure, he packed the basic items that I would need, but I wish he would have told me. Mainly so that I could have avoided going and trying to come up with some other plans. But after huffing on my part, I decided to give it a go to see how it went. So, we went camping. And not the kind where there's a toilet block and you're in a field with modern amenities. No. To my partner, that isn't even real camping. So, we had to drive, leave the car, and walk a long way to the campsite. It was one of those go out into the bush to do your business kind of places. While we walked to the campsite, my partner told me how happy and excited he was to try this out. I was happy that he was happy, I guess. We found the area, and it was nothing but dirt. There was a campfire site further down the pathway, but that was it. I groaned and watched while my partner enthusiastically put up the tent that we would be sleeping in. I told him that I was going to have a look around, and he told me not to wander off. He had absolutely no need to tell me that. The site was maintained, so it wasn't quite bushland. There wasn't a lot of leaves or twigs everywhere, and there were signs up. Mainly, it was about how to manage fires, to clean up after yourselves, and that sort of thing. There were warnings about cliffs in the distance, and after that, I stopped paying attention. After a while, I started getting a creepy feeling. It was too quiet for me. I didn't want to say anything and ruin the good time that my partner was having, but I kept having the feeling that I was being watched by something. I hated that feeling. I also hated how I wouldn't be able to sit on my phone either. I needed to maintain the charge in case of an emergency, and my partner wanted to be disconnected from it all. We went for a walk, came back, got dinner ready, chatted, ate, and this is a little personal, but we made love under the stars. I don't know how much you want me to go into detail, and I guess I should censor it. It was beautiful, and I have to admit that I was enjoying it. It was starting to get colder, so we moved into the tent, keeping the light on while we did what we did. It was nice, and we didn't have to worry about the neighbors complaining about us again. We went about it when I thought I saw the shadow of a person watching us from the corner of my eye. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. My partner thought that it was funny and, like the cheeky prick that he is, started teasing me about it. I laughed about it with him until I saw it watching me again. It was far too big to be a human. It looked like a giant ape of some kind. I couldn't see what color it was because it was dark, but it was hairy and it had those big arms. Kind of like how gorillas do. It wasn't baring its teeth or anything, it was just watching. But it isn't every day that something like that happens. I let out a scream and it scared the crap out of my boyfriend. In a panic, I told him what he saw and he, like an idiot, went out with a baseball bat to threaten whoever it was. He said that he saw it run into the bush, but he couldn't see exactly where it went. I told him that we were going home at first light. I was done. I didn't want anything to do with going camping, and my monthly curse had come. I only say this because it is needed later on. We left, and I wanted to completely put the incident behind us. Before we left, my partner looked at the bushes and things like he was a tracker. He said that he saw a footprint out there that was huge. Not that I saw it, nor wanted to see it. My partner, on the other hand, wanted to know everything about it. Now, there are different names for it, but the Yowie is the most common one. As he researched more, he also told me that Yowies were interested in women and tended to appear more when they were on their cycles. They have quite a large range, and there were some other sightings in the area that we were at. There was one as recent as about 6 months to a year ago. Not that he told me that before we went. He told me that they could mimic bird sounds, and some sites said that they could mimic voices. I didn't hear anything, so I don't know any of that. It did scare me, though, and it confirmed all of my beliefs that I should never, ever go camping ever again. I don't know what to think. But yeah, that was my encounter with a Yowie while I was camping with my partner. I never want to go anywhere near the bush ever again. And you will never catch me camping again either. Alright, so I live in an area that has a lot of bogans in it, or ishays. I think they're called chavs in the UK, and I'm not really sure about the US. It can get really rough at night, and it's known for not being a safe place to spend time. I won't name the suburb, but it has been on the news more than once. The younger bogans, they like to go to the local macas late at night and hang out in the car park with their cars. A lot of them are too young to get into clubs or have already been kicked out of them. The local sporting oval is another spot that they like to go and smash beer bottles at. I think it was mostly because they were cashed up to get some food, but not enough to really do anything. Most of the time, they're out the back, smoking dearies, drinking and acting like a bunch of galas. It's also a place where drug deals go down. I guess, for legal reasons, I'll say that it happens allegedly. Occasionally, they will try to roll people for their money or phones before the pigs come to drive them off. They always come back, though, and they loiter. I mean, they walk in and buy stuff, so I guess that's why they're tolerated. And they're the types to go in and throw food, and abuse the staff, and throw things around. It isn't good to judge people, I know, but still. Anyways, I went there with my mates, and it was after we were having a good time at one of the clubs. It was closing, so I'm guessing it was around 15 to 2 in the morning, or thereabouts. I'm not really sure, to be honest. We needed to sober up and figured some greasy macas would be the best way to fix it. It was either that or Dirty Bird, or KFC as it's called in the US. Other than a kebab shop down the road, they were the only places open besides the Servo, but that was even further away. We landed on getting some macas, and maybe if we had gone to the KFC, things would have been a bit different. There were about 8 of us there. We walked together in a loose group and were laughing. It had been a fun night. We had walked past a group of Ashays, and they called out to us. We called out back to them as we walked into the Macus, and it went on for a bit. The Macus was dead quiet with only a few people working there, and occasionally some people going through the drive-thru. They didn't follow us inside. We went and ordered our food, got our orders, and had decided whether we were going to eat in or eat in the car park. We had decided that we wanted to eat outside in the car park and went back out again. They then called us... I'm not going to read the exact words that this person wrote for the sake of pleasing the YouTube gods, so I will say they called us effing C-words. We called back to them, but both of us went to our own ends. We were partly responsible, I guess. We could have kept walking away. We sat on top of our cars, minding our own business and eating our food, when one of the Ashays screamed something at us and threw a drink at us. The drink went all over one of my friends, completely soaking him. I can't remember what my friend said in response. Again, we could have walked away, but they were arching up at us. One of the distinct things that I remember that was said was, censoring for the YouTube gods again here, "Oi, effing dog C-word." There was no mistaking what was likely going to happen at this point. We stood up and we got into a fight with them. It was fairly evenly matched, even though there were more of them. It didn't seem like it was going to be too serious, but then one of them pulled out a knife and stabbed my friend in the stomach. His mate started swearing at him, surprisingly. All of my attention was on helping my friend and trying to make sure that he stayed alive. All I can remember is his scream and the sight of blood on my hands afterwards. I actually still have nightmares about it. After we got them away, we saw the blood and tried to stop him from bleeding out. The Macus workers came out to help us. I'm pretty sure they called the cops and the ambos too. Of course, the Ashays ran away, and we were waiting for the cops and the ambos to get him to the hospital. Making the drunk call to his parents late that night wasn't good. And really, we were lucky that we weren't arrested. Each of us had to give a statement to the cops about what happened. Thankfully, he didn't die. And he did go on to make a full recovery, with only a scar that he shows off whenever he can. He has, however, stopped drinking, and he's begun to clean up his act, so that's one good thing. You can say that he got lucky, and we've all still gone back to that local Macus, and yes, the Ashays still occasionally hang out there. We're not gonna let them win. My mate refused to go back for a while, and yeah, I can understand it, but we also couldn't let him get scared of it. We told him to harden up and went back there. He did, and we're all proud of him for that. Since then, there have been the occasional bashing, or people have been rolled for their wallets or whatever. There haven't been any more stabbings, though. It is still technically being investigated by the cops, so I don't want to potentially ruin the case. It's not a ghost story, but I guess you could still call it scary. No one has any idea why it happened. So, keep your guard up when you go out drinking, and remember to avoid certain things. maybe it wouldn't have happened if we had just walked away from them. So this was a collection of 5 Australian horror stories, terrifying Australian stories, creepy stories from the land down under. Tell me, can you hear the thunder, Vegemite sandwich? That's how that song goes, right? Really good stories, and it's nice to have this perspective from people, these stories from people outside of the U.S., because I know a lot of the stories I do are Americentric, and that's because I am an American and a lot of my audience is American. So to have some stories from outside of this country is kind of nice. I may do more of these if I get more. I know these came from, like I said, some fans I have outside of the U.S., down under and such. I've got fans all over the world, which is a weird thing for me to say. Never thought I'd be able to say those words, but I know that I do, because I've talked to them. I've spoken with these people. So, a huge thank you to everyone that sent their stories in this way, and all the stories that I use from other sources. Thank you to everyone who writes those. You guys are all amazing. Thank you to all of you who listen. Seriously. Let me know if you want more of these stories. If not, it's fine. I could do it as a one-off and then never again, or if you want more, I could do it more. What am I trying to say? I don't know. Yeah. Thank you. If you enjoyed the video, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to the channel. That would be fantastic of you to do so. And if you really liked what you heard, consider leaving me a comment down below. I got printer ink on my shirt. That's not cool, man. Anyways, yeah. Leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts and how you're doing today. Not much else to say. I guess I will see you all on the next video, friends. But until that happens, remember you are loved, valid, and important. You're the best you that you can be. Nobody should ever tell you otherwise. Don't let them. And of course, until I see you again, beautiful people, much love, and sleep well.